good journalist is a journalist that, goes on the ground, but they don't just sit, in front of a mic and talk to you, that's a podcaster. That's not a real investigator or, a journalist. I don't believe a real journalist, I believe, goes out there and chases the story. Okay. He goes out there and collects the trail of evidence. Number two, a good journalist does not outsource the burden of proof. He or she does not make a bold claim without showing you the trail of evidence. They take you along. They take it upon themselves. They make it their responsibility to go out there and map out the whole trail of evidence. Number three, they show you the sources. They don't say, I have these hidden sources.
Grace and peace, everybody. We are back. We got a content creator. I don't think we've talked about her. Either we've talked about her in the past or we haven't talked about her at all. But her name is Nadia Marr. And she is comparing what real journalism is to what fake journalism is. And she's going to be using Nick Shirley and Candace Owens. I think you already know who is going to be who's going to be representing which aspect of it. So let's bring Nadia up here to the front of the church. Let's go.
So by now, you probably have seen 100 of memes about the Somalian fraud, about the empty daycares that do not have any children. This big story that Nick Shirley broke.
Without much further ado, I give you the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good.
What is this?
A center for ants. Center has to be at least 3 times bigger than this. He's absolutely right.
A real investigation into this network of fraud that was going on for years. And one of the most shocking things about all of this, that, it's not your major networks like CNN or NBC or Fox that broke this story. It was an independent journalist, who with his little YouTube camera and just took us into the heart of this fraud in Minnesota. And the reason why I decided to make this video is because what Nick Shirley did is a great example of what great journalism requires and is, And for months now on this channel, we've been talking about Candace Owens and how terrible she is, what kind of grifter that she is, how she's not a real journalist, that she is an actual sensationalist, who lies and slanders, who makes bold claims and then outsources the burden of proof, who does not actually present you real evidence, that calls anomalies real evidence, who just strings you along. And in today's video, I actually want to compare, I want to show how Nick Shirley is actually a real journalist and how it's different than what Candace Owens has been doing for months now, that I've been calling out because I was so shocked that people were falling for Candace Owens's, so-called investigation. I'm like, how is it that people cannot see through this? How is it that she has, the #1 podcast in the world when she's literally there sitting in her little booth and lying for an hour and a half on her stupid podcast? I'm like, how are people just so deceived? And if you know anything about this channel, we talk about truth and we care about truth on this channel. Obviously we care about Christ is the greatest truth of all time, who is truth. But, just in general, there's a standard of journalism that we've always had in this nation. People always understood what evidence is, what presenting a case was about, and it seems like we've completely lost that. So one of the reasons why I found, this story that Nick Shirley broke so inspired.
I want to jump on what Nadia is saying right here, not to disagree, but I don't think we have forgotten what real evidence is. I think the sensationalist followers, the Candace cult followers, have forgotten, or rather just disregard, because she's giving them that juicy bits, that gossip that sinks down into their bones and just nourishes them with this wickedness and this poison. So no, I don't think we had forgotten. I think Candace's people have been, for lack of a better term, turned over to a reprobate mind where they actually believe this foolishness that she's saying. But I agree with Nadia 100%. So let's keep it going. Let's roll.
And so cathartic in a sense is because, it was a real investigation, showed us a real trail of evidence. It wasn't a bold claim that was made like a conspiracy theory style. You have these people on the right, especially right now, who love to dwell in these conspiracies and present them as if they're real facts, as if they're real evidence for their claims, and they're getting a lot of attention and a lot of money, but they're not really providing you and me the real journalism, the rigor that it takes. They're incompetent, they're liars and they're grifters and they're slanderers. They just make up stuff on the go because they know that the market right now is, responding to sensationalism and conspiracy. And people are just outsourcing the critical thinking. So in today's video, I want to talk about certain ways that Shirley has elevated the standard of journalism in our country. And first, the thing that you see him doing is that he's on the ground. He is in Minnesota. So he is a journalist who's a reporter and who's taking us along with him.
We're going to go to these daycare centers. We're going to see what's actually happening.
Okay, so we have to be careful because these people are very violent. They're exceptionally violent.
Now, with all of David's evidence, we headed out to the streets of Minneapolis to see how much fraud we could uncover in one afternoon. Where we go?
Look at the trail of evidence. He's not here like Candace Owens, making bold claims and then talking about some sources, hidden sources that she has, that she can't, tell us what the sources are. Even when she does have, this real source, it's like it looks so chaotic and unclear if that's actually evidence or not. But when you see, Nick Shirley taking you along, he's inviting you as the audience to come with him and follow the trail of evidence outlined in clarity without any kind of like conspiratorial nature to it. It's clear as day that the evidence speaks for itself.
Now we're going to the next daycare center. How much money has this one generated?
This one in fiscal year 2025, $1,042,059. In fiscal year 2024, $1,059,078. And in fiscal year 2023, $727,336.
Could he have been like, okay, I'm noticing a lot of Somalis in here. I feel like they're, in some kind of fraud. Let me show you about this little bite and this little bite. He could have done that. He could have, got into this conspiratorial route and, made a bold claim without evidence. But that's not what he does. You see him take you from daycare to daycare with real taxpayer dollars, showing you the receipts of how many children are expected to be there. The fact that there are no children at these daycares, the fact that this has been going on for years now, this corruption, this fraud.
We would like to know.
Well, it says we're trying to figure out 102 children. Is that for this facility?
What is the name?
It's from the state of Minnesota website. It says you have 102 children here in your child care.
Which child care name is a lot of
Minnesota Child Care right here. It's from the state of Minnesota's website. We're just wondering where the children are.
Where the children are.
Yeah, where are the children? It says you have 102 children here and you got $2.66 million this year in funding and $2.5 million last year. We're just wondering where the kids are.
And who are you?
My name's Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley.
And where are you? Which department?
Oh, we are from ourselves.
Yeah.
Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going. Look at that. Shut us down. Where are the children at? No children inside of this daycare center. And look at this daycare center right here. No children inside of this daycare center. But between those buildings, over $2.6 million.
He's not sitting like Candace in a little booth and, talking to four walls and the camera, making these accusations about, TPUSA and Israel and Mossad and all these people, were involved in Charlie's death. Real journalism, I truly believe, takes to being on the ground. You breaking the story, you taking us as an audience into those sites, into those places, and here's the thing. Nick Shirley has been doing this for a while now. This is not the first time that he takes you along into a real investigation.
Hey, if you follow Nick Shirley, comment down below. When was your first time meeting Nick, if you will? I believe he was boots on the ground at the LA riot, the ICE protest, if you will. And that's when I met Nick. That's when I first was introduced to Nick Shirley. When was your first time? Comment down below. When did you first run into Nick Shirley? And I just thought it was super cool that this young guy was out there, interviewing people at the ICE riot in LA, I believe it was. Or it might have been the one in New York. I got to look back. But when was your first time meeting Nick? And shout out to Nadia. This is an excellent summary. I love this.
So, there's much respect to him for actually having standard, not, abusing the ignorance of the masses, but actually elevating the standards of journalism. He has countless times put himself in the line of danger to bring truth to us, as an audience, as the American people. I mean, think about $8 billion literally of taxpayer money has gone into this Somalian fraud. This is the thing that affects me and you. Like, we are the taxpayer. We are the people who are funding this, And the fact that Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar did not know about this, that's nonsense. And what even more shocks me, it's like, wow, even the FBI did not, I guess, know about this. I mean, like, how is it that this independent journalist breaks a story like this? And I hope this really inspires people and shows them, what to expect from people who actually make bold claims, who say they have a real story, who don't just like use a little bit bites and pieces, to speculate, who are not there just saying, I'm just asking questions without actually providing you with a robust trail of evidence. That's what actual journalism used to be, actually, 20, 30 years ago in this country, until now, like, where we don't no longer trust main big media sources like CNN, like, they've lost the trust of the public. And so all of us started to watch people on YouTube like Daily Wire, and even though it created a more of a like an independent sort of market of people who can just sort of start talking, it's also created, where these things are not being checked, not a system of fact checking. It's like there's no real standard. Anybody can create a podcast and start yapping for an hour, and they don't necessarily have to be checked or interrogated whether or not they're actually providing real evidence. It's sort of the wild frontier. And the sad thing is, like, the more sensationalist you make your content, the more shocking it is, the more, masses you attract. And, so to have a story like this, with Nick Shirley, doing this real investigation, based on real proof, based on real evidence, it was like a breath of fresh air. And ultimately, I want to talk about this and tie in, this is a Christian channel, is that the fact that there's nothing hidden that will not be made known. There's nothing hidden that will not ultimately come to light and be exposed, and it might look like, for years you're getting away with it, but God is a God of justice. And ultimately, all things are fraudulent and of darkness. They will come to light, and people will have to reap the consequences of their actions. Because, people act like there is no God, upstairs, but there's absolutely a God in heaven who watches over the affairs of men and judges them accordingly. So, so often people who are evildoers, they think they can get away. They can just lie and deceive. And how sad it is to see people on the right, just literally go from being actual truth tellers to just becoming the woke right, call themselves journalists, real investigators. They're liars and slanderers and grifters, and they need to be exposed for their lies. I'm still in complete shock about these, about these daycares.
It is kind of
it's just so evil. And the fact that it involves children, like, it's just like, it's such a like sinister plot. Like, you think of like daycares, like one of the most like sweetest, innocent places. And it's like this diabolical, corrupt fraud of like lies. And it's just linked somehow to children and daycares. Like, it's just so sinister. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like so unbelievably sinister to me. And just to conclude and summarize, what does actual journalism require? Which is this: good journalist is a journalist that, goes on the ground. But they don't just sit, in front of a mic and talk to you, That's a podcaster. That's not a real investigator or, a journalist. I don't believe a real journalist, I believe, goes out there and chases the story, okay? He goes out there and collects the trail of evidence. Number two, a good journalist does not outsource the burden of proof. He or she does not make a bold claim without showing you the trail of evidence. They take you along. They take it upon themselves. They make it their responsibility to go out there and map out the whole trail of evidence. Number three, they show you the sources. They don't say, I have these hidden sources. I have these hidden people. Show you the people that they've talked to. They show you the documents. They don't keep anything hidden. They make it known and put it in the light. They don't talk about these like, I'll have special sources, that's what Candace does. That's what conspiratorial people do. But real journalists, they actually enjoy, showing you the whole trail of evidence that they map out. And number four, real journalists put themselves in danger for the sake of truth. Their pursuit of truth often comes at a cost. You look at Nick Shirley, he literally puts himself in a light of danger, because he goes and interviews these people. He could be shot. He can be robbed, he can be beaten, and someone always say, well, Candace can't do that because she's a mom, and then she should not make the bold claims that she does, she just should stay at home and raise her children then, But if you're going to call yourself a real journalist, as someone who's really after a story, then you have to expect that might come at a cost to putting yourself in real danger.
I'm going to just push back on the people that say that Candace could do it. Candace won't do that. There's no way in the world that you'll see Candace Owens, boots on the ground, interviewing anyone. She hasn't even gone to UVU to do any research, to do any live reporting of what happened. I'm sorry, what UVU even looks like. I've done this. I've gone places to show you what the place actually looks like, so you can get an idea of the lay of the land. So when we say this is happening or this event happened in this place, so you go, oh yeah, I kind of saw the video of that. And Candace could have done that. The 6 times that she's gone on vacation since Charlie Kirk has been assassinated, she could have at least gone to UVU and at least did a walk around, met with the chief of police, met with the president, met with the various student organizations, or stood where Charlie Kirk was. She could have done that stuff. That was just the basics. She won't do it because she's not, as Nadia is pointing out here, she's not a real journalist. At best, at very best, she's a podcaster. But even worse than that, she's really just a gossip girl. That's really it. Let's finish this up. Thank you so much, Nadia, for this.
But they're after truth. And that is what's so inspiring about Nick Shirley. And he absolutely deserves the praise that he's gotten from President Trump, from everyone. Like, I think to myself, if Trump had not come to office and he had not become strict on immigration, think about Tim Walz was really the running mate of Kamala Harris. Like, they all would have let more violent people in our nation. They would have caused a complete economic collapse with inflation. Our debt would have skyrocketed. Like, when I think about, had President Trump not come to the office, who knows what would have happened to our nation? This goes to show that policy and the people that we elect actually do matter. This is why politics is important, and you being discerning of the people that you're trusting. And people will be like, oh, President Trump is so rough, and at least Trump is what he is. But these people who are on Democrat side, they smile at you and they're like so, charismatic and whatnot. It's good people, right? But behind our backs, they're out here engaging in fraud. They're all in this cahoot. And that is something that you have to understand, it's like being discerning about the people that we elect. Anyway, I just wanted to summarize that, and like I said, and just shout out to Nick Shirley for being a great journalist. And I hope he inspires a whole battalion of these great independent journalists, because clearly we cannot trust, the major news sources, even like shout out to real people who are truly after truth, who are really willing to even put themselves in danger. That's real courage, man. That's real courage. All right, guys, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Please make sure you go check out what she's doing over there. And I agree with her 100%. I agree that we need a battalion of Nick Shirleys and that are holding themselves up to a journalistic standard of getting involved and actually boots on the ground. Well, let me make sure they themselves are not becoming the story, but they are reporting and researching the story, but they're keeping themselves out of the story. I would also want to add that, but then also they're boots on the ground. They're asking the tough questions. They're finding out and giving us the full lay of the land so that we can make an informed decision about this, and also just keep exposing truth. Let me know what you thought about it. And like I said, comment in the comment section. Let me know, when did you find out about Nick Shirley? And when was your first introduction to Nick Shirley? Shout out again to Nadia Mar. Link will be down in the description. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'm looking forward to doing this again with you all real soon. So until next time, grace and peace. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the JWhit Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do me a favor and hit me up with that 3-piece special. Like the video, subscribe, and of course, share it with somebody who would also enjoy this type of content. And make sure you leave a comment, because I do pin the best comments to the top. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.